if you've done a launch that you thought went brilliantly, only to get to the sales bit and have no one actually buy, then I might have the answer as to why that might be. We're going to be looking at what you need to consider when you're launching to make sure that that launch is the perfect thing you need in order to actually sell the product or service you're going to sell at the end. In this episode, we're going to be looking at why you actually need to launch in the first place and what do I mean by the term launch. And I've put together an offer audience launch matrix, which is going to give you a really good, simple plan that you can follow as to how to know what type of launch to do for the audience that you've got and the offer that you've got. But let's get started by talking about why we actually have to launch in the first place. And what do I mean by that? Well, when I say launching, lots of people think I mean putting an offer out to the world for the first time. But in the online space, and normally in marketing, that's what it would be. But in the online space, that's not the case. We use the term launch basically for a marketing campaign. When you have an online offer, so a course, a membership, a coaching program, something that you are delivering online, often what happens is we need some kind of activity around that thing in order to sell it. We would love to think that we create it, we put it up on our website and it just gets sold every single day. And it's not that that never happens, it can, but that actually takes a lot of strategic marketing stuff anyway. But normally the easiest and simplest way that we can actually get people to buy the thing that we are selling is by creating a launch. And by launch, we mean a marketing campaign. And when I talk about launches, I talk about launch experiences. And basically, this is the strategy, the campaign that you use to actually sell the thing. So the very first thing is you need to do one of these things. Creating an offer, sending out a couple of emails, might have cut it back in 2019, 2020, but that doesn't cut it anymore. We really need to create some experience and some interest around launching the thing that we are offering. And the truth is, there are many different ways that we can launch a product or service online. Lots of different ways that I talk about, including webinars / masterclasses, they're the same thing, paid workshops, you could do things like boot camps and challenges, open house experiences. There is lots of different ways in which you can actually launch your online offer. And when I say launch, I don't mean for the first time, I just mean sell your online offer. One of the things I see, or one of the mistakes I see when people are doing a launch for their offer, or they are using this experience to sell their online offer, is they are just seeing it as a standalone thing. They're not necessarily putting the two things together. Let me explain. Often I will say to someone, you need a launch experience to help launch your offer or to sell your offer. And they'll think, great, I'll do a webinar. And then they think, what could I do a webinar about? And they're rather than actually thinking about how is this fitting in with the thing that they're selling, they're just going through the motions of having a webinar or a masterclass or a challenge. They're not necessarily thinking about what am I trying to sell? So start with the end in mind. What is the actual thing you're trying to sell and that you're going to use this launch experience to sell it? And then how can we make the launch experience a natural prerequisite to the thing you're selling? So when someone's in the launch experience, how can that feel like the perfect first step or natural step to your product and service? A couple of great examples are Amy Porterfield. She sells Digital Course Academy, which is a big course all about how to do online courses. And her bootcamp, her launch experience is a bootcamp called Course Confident or Course Confidence. And what this does is it gets you confident with the idea of you can even do a course. It gets you in the mindset of what might that course look like? How might I sell that course? It gets you even considering that you want to do a course. So when someone's gone through the bootcamp and they've gone, this is great, I now have a concept for a course and I have confidence that I can sell a course, the next natural step is to buy Amy's Digital Course Academy, which tells them all the various steps on how to do the course. Jenna Kutcher is also launching at the point I'm recording this, and she is currently doing a webinar all about the 101 of podcasting and basically why someone wants to start a podcast. And then the product that she's going to be selling off the back of it is her podcasting course, which helps you do all the things. You can see from both those examples, their launch experience was the perfect first step, or was the perfect prerequisite thing in order to take you to the product and service that they were offering. I really need you to give yourself more time when you're thinking about that launch experience. And rather than just seeing it as something that you do to create some interest and get people to come and sit in front of you and see what you do, it really has to be that your offer is the natural next step, or the launch experience is the perfect prerequisite to the thing that you're selling. That really needs to fit hand in hand, which is another great reason why when you get to the offer and when you get to sell, it doesn't feel like a bait and switch. It doesn't feel like, God, this feels horrible. It feels like, okay, this is the next natural step. I've delivered on what I've said I'm going to do over here. And if you want more or you want to take the next step, come and join me in the program. Okay, let's talk about the next reason why people possibly aren't buying. And let me introduce to you my offer audience launch matrix. What happens is, when we launch, there are lots of different ways that we can do it. As I've talked about, we could do a webinar that's an hour long. We could do a 5-day challenge. We could do a bootcamp that stretches over a couple of weeks. There are lots of different ways to launch. So how do you know what's the best way to launch that's going to get you the maximum output, i.e. the most sales at the end? And honestly, that launch experience, that marketing campaign has a lot to do with the success of your sales. If you pick the wrong one, you're either putting way too much work in when you don't need to and will exhaust yourself, or you are creating something that will never sell your offer because the fit is all completely wrong. Now, in order to look at this matrix, we need to look at two things of your current business. We need to understand how warm your current audience are, and we need to understand the price of your offer. So if you don't know those two things, then that might be the first place to start. But let's assume we know the price of your offer and how warm your audience are. The reason we need to know these two things is because it's really going to help us understand how much effort we need to put into launch. In this matrix, we are looking at, on one axis, we are looking at low cost offers to high cost offers. And on the other side, we are looking at cold audiences to warm audiences. Now, I know what you're going to ask me, what makes a low cost offer and what's a high cost offer? Well, this is never, anything I do is never as straightforward as just going, this is the answer. That's been the main problem with the online space for all these years, is that so many experts have come up here and gone, this is the answer to your dreams. And there is no single one straight thing. Inevitably, I need to have a conversation with someone. But to give you a kind of idea, I would say a low cost offer is anything around £100, $100. Middle cost might be 500, 600, 700, and then higher cost might be 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. So that gives you a kind of vague idea. And then a warm audience, it's not really as easy as saying, this is what a warm audience looks like. You know how warm your audience is. Do they know who you are? Have you got lots of people interacting with? Do you get good engagement on your social media? Are you getting a good open rate and click rate on your emails? And again, that might look very different for different business owners. So someone who has a teeny tiny audience, they might be super warm and the open rates might be really high and the engagement might be really high. And therefore, we might say they have a warm audience. Someone might have a much lower engagement rate, but a bigger audience, but actually that might still be warm for them and their industry and the type of thing they do. Like I said, that's not as easy as an exact science. Neither of them are, but how warm are the people that are in your world? Have you been doing this a long time? Do people know what you're talking about? As in, for me, they know that I talk about launching and online businesses. So if they want help in that, they come and find me. Okay, so let's say we have a vague idea of how warm our audience is. Again, if you've just started the business, it's going to be a cold audience. If you've just started your email list, they're going to be cold. We have an idea of how warm our audience is from cold to warm, and then we have an idea of our cost of our product from low cost to high cost. In this matrix, as you can see, and if you're listening to this, then you might want to head over to YouTube and take a look. We basically have different launch experience that fit really well with these different ones. So I'm going to talk you through it in case you're not seeing it on screen. At low cost and low and cold audiences, you can get away with doing something like a webinar. Now, with a webinar or a masterclass or an evergreen funnel, the reason you can get away with a cold audience is because it's low cost. If you are trying to sell something really high cost to a cold audience, you're not going to be able to just give them a 1 hour webinar and that be the answer and that fix it and that sell it. That isn't going to happen because, as we all know, we need to build that know, like, and trust factor. And the higher the cost, the higher we need to build that trust. The higher we need people in our world that go, you definitely do know what you're talking about and I can trust that you're going to deliver. However, when it's lower cost, we don't need to build that quite as high and quite as much. So bottom corner, if you've got a low cost offer and you have a cold audience, then doing something like a webinar or an evergreen funnel could work really well for you. Then let's go to the other extreme. Let's say you are doing something that is high cost and you have a warm audience. Something like a bootcamp, a challenge, or something where like a paid workshop would work really well. So these are the things that I tend to use. I have a warmer audience. Now, even if they're not super, super warm, if you are known for the thing and they've only just come into your world, but they can see that you have lots of experience, you've spoken in lots of places, you are known for this, then that helps warm them up quicker. But for me, when I'm doing a challenge or a boot camp, someone needs to spend some time with me in order to go, okay, we can definitely trust her. She knows what she's talking about. And therefore, we are willing to pay the investment of the higher thing. The chances of me selling my program on a webinar, even with a warm audience, might be harder. They need a bit more convincing. So like I said, in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got the webinar for low cost offers and cold audiences. And in the top corner for warm audiences and high cost, we have got things like boot camps and challenges. So now let's look at the other two boxes. So the first box is a warm audience and a low cost offer. Well, technically at this point, you could do a webinar. That would be easy. That would work really well. But one of the things that often comes up in this box that I've shared in this box is things like mini workshops, because you don't need to spend quite so long on it, or things like an open house for a membership. When you have a membership, when you have a warm audience and it's a low cost-ish offer because it's a membership, something like an open house can work really, really well because you need a warm audience to be at the point where they're just making the decision to join your membership or not. Then in the other corner, in the cold and high cost, what do we put in there? Well, what we need to do here is we have a cold audience that don't know, like, and trust us, and we have a high cost product that requires high trust in order for someone to hand over the money. So we're going to have to work a whole lot harder in this space. You could, again, put things like challenges and boot camps into that space. There are some cold audiences that would work depending on the length of time. But one of the things I would suggest, or a couple of options you've got here, is either a much longer bootcamp or challenge. So sometimes people do things like 30 days or 90 days because you're really building up that trust and that know, like, and trust factor at that point. Or the other thing that you could do is you could put on something like a summit or an in-person event. Now, I know I don't talk a lot about in-person events alongside online businesses, but they can work really well, especially when you need to build that trust factor quickly. Things like summits, again, you're bringing a cold audience, but because you are running the summit or you're running a multi-day online event like I did a couple of years back, you are building that trust factor really quickly. And they're spending a big chunk of time with you during the summit. They're seeing your face a lot. They're seeing the other experts that you're bringing in. And that can effectively really help fast forward that know, like, and trust factor. So let's recap that whole matrix now. If you have a low cost offer and a cold audience, the best thing that you can do is a webinar or a masterclass. If you have a high cost offer and a warm audience, then something like a bootcamp or a challenge would work really, really well for you. If you have a low cost offer and a warm audience, if you have a low cost offer and a warm audience, then a webinar would still work perfectly. But also, if you have a membership, then an open house would be perfect for this, or maybe some mini workshops. If you have a high cost offer and a cold audience, then you need to consider how you can build that trust fast in things like summits, longer challenges, or an in-person event. I really hope that showing you this way, giving you this matrix, is giving you a really clearer idea on how the launch experience, looking at your offer and your audience, really can help you or massively disadvantage you when you're going to sell your offer. So I want you to go and look at your offer, your audience, and your launch experience and make a decision as to how, based on what we've shared in this session, what you think you could create as your next launch experience so that you can actually get some sales at the end of that experience. If you are going to be launching in 2026, then why not go and take my quiz? It's going to tell you whether you are ready to scale your online offer. Either scan the QR code, click the link in the description, or head to the link in my bio. And whether you are watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you can hit a like, maybe drop me a comment as well. That would be amazing and I'd appreciate it so much. And I will see you in the next video.